Hello everyone, and welcome back to the series where I build a graphical text editor from the ground up, starting from just the terminal. Today I'm going to be showing how I handle logging and error checking, and I also added some improvements to the text buffer because I was reaching the limits of the 4 kilobytes I had originally allocated. And I also added in the ability to scroll up and down using the mouse wheel. But with that said, let's take a look at the code. So I'm in logger.hpp, and normally header files aren't that interesting, but this time we're using templates, so the header file is going to be a lot more interesting this time. So first things first, we've got a class here that is a static class. There are no non-static members. So we have some initialize and deinitialize functions here, and those just start or open the file and then close the file. And then I've got fatal, error, warn, and info. I'll show you guys those in a minute here, but they just send messages with some tags to the file. And then we got debug, and debug is what's called a variadic template, which among other things means that I can use a variable number of arguments with different types, and I can set them up to be handled in a kind of custom fashion according to what I need. So right here in the function, I also have this thing called source location. If you've never used this, it's quite a useful tool that allows you to get the information like the file name and the function name and the line and column of wherever this function is called. So I'll show you guys a little trick for using that in a second. And then in the function itself here, I have a call to fprintf that puts all that various information into a message to the log file. And then it calls this thing called recursive debug. And that is where I use all of those variadic arguments to actually print out a bunch of stuff here in a recursive fashion. So we'll log the parameter that is provided, the argument, and it does that using this function, this log param function. And if it doesn't know what the type is, then it will use this kind of default printing. But if it knows the type, so if it's an integer, a long, float, string, things like that, then it will actually print out something specific for those and send it to the file. All of this stuff goes to the log file as opposed to the standard output, because I'm using the standard output for the editor itself, and it's also a lot easier to search through a file. So that's basically it. It's a little more complicated and technical to put together than it is to just kind of show off, but this, I think, is going to work pretty well for quite a long time. And then I've got the static log file here. This is just a file handler, and there's some other stuff that goes into the file object, but that's not terribly important here. And then this little bit at the end is a really useful thing. If you have something that you do not want to show up in a final product, but you do want it to be used generally, then this ndebug definition is really helpful. So often when you go into release mode, you'll define ndebug. And so in this case, if that is the case, if the programmer or the compiler defines ndebug, which is what it does in release mode, then it will not have all of this code here. So it will remove this this call to the debug function, and it will just basically make this little bit of code here completely worthless. And then also having a macro means that I can easily include this std source location current function call, which is what gives me all the information from wherever this debug function is being called. So that's all that's in logger.hpp. I'll just go ahead and show off logger.cpp real quick. This is pretty simple. I've got some error checking, and some of the error checking I have inside of these ndebug preprocessor macros, and that's just because it means that when I'm running this normally, it's not going to slow down by checking these. And it's not much slow down, technically speaking, but I figured that we don't necessarily need it in those cases. And then so here just opens the file, and then sends a message letting us know that the logger is initialized. If it fails, then it'll return an error. dinit, pretty simple, just flushes the log file and closes it. Fatal, and this applies to basically all of the other basic logging functions. It just takes, as I mentioned before, takes a message and then throws that into a log file with a tag. Now, I haven't included timestamps for these. I may end up doing that in the future, but I don't think it's truly necessary for the moment, so I won't bother with that. And then, other than that, that's basically everything. This is fairly simple, this part was. The rest of it was horrifically complicated, but this particular part was pretty easy. And so I'll take a quick look at textbuffer.cpp. And in this case, the only thing that really changed here was, as I mentioned, I had to do some stuff to fix the allocation and resizing. So in this case, I have this resize buffer here. And what that does is whenever the buffer fills up, it will call this and get the buffer reallocated to a size that is larger so it can continue to do its job. And then I also made a change to advance and retreat, and that is to switch out memcopy for memmove. This is just because when you use memcopy, it'll be undefined behavior. It will not be happy if you use that when you have an overlapping data location. So let's say you've got 10 bytes of data and you move them 5 bytes forward. That's overlapping, and so memcopy, that's described as undefined behavior. Now, it may still technically work, but it's a bad idea. It's not a great idea to do that. So in this case, since I have my compiler set up to warn me and throw a fit if it detects undefined behavior, I had to switch this over to memmove so that it would actually work. And that's everything in textbuffer.cpp. And then in main.cpp, we've got a few changes. So right here, I'm initializing the logger. Pretty basic stuff. And then I've got kind of more standardized error checking here. So it checks if the file got opened or not. It does things like send some debugging messages to say what's going on. I also added in a little bit so that it would tell me what inputs I'm getting, and this was actually instrumental in me figuring out how to get the scroll wheel to work properly. And so now I have a working logger, not a moment too soon because things are going to start to get more complicated. So in the next episode, I plan on working on the draw buffer, and this is going to be a little more difficult because I've never really done something like this, but I think it'll be pretty good. I think it'll be pretty interesting. And hopefully I'll be able to get it done within the kind of 3-day time frame that I've sort of landed on for all the previous episodes, but we'll see. On another note, I wanted to mention that now that I have this new editor that I think looks pretty good and editing in it is pretty easy to read and easy to see, I kind of wanted to have a sort of setup where I record, take the footage, because I recorded all the footage for this, and edit it, remove all the kind of slow bits where I'm not typing anything or where there was like a weird pause, and put it as like a kind of a long video just kind of showing what's going on, and then put some kind of chill music on it or something like that. Now, I'll still be releasing these videos because I like the format and I think it works pretty well for me, but these new ones would be in addition to that. And so if that's something that you would like to see, then just let me know in the comments. Other than that, that is everything. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found this interesting or useful, and I'll see you in the next episode.